Well, welcome to everyone that has joined Profiles in the Justice Profession. We're so happy that you are here with us this afternoon. Before we get started, I do want to cover just a few logistical things. We are recording this session. Captions have been enabled. You can turn them on and off using the Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen, if that would be helpful for you. The chat function is also on, and we encourage you to use it. If you would like to ask questions, we will be trying to answer those as well. And with that said, I am very excited to introduce you today to our host, Frank Schmalleger, and our guest of honor, Kyle Plussa. Kyle has more than a dozen years of experience as a Florida certified law enforcement officer, currently appointed as a deputy sheriff. He holds multiple degrees and postgraduate certificates from decades of studies in criminal justice administration, criminal law and policy development, police leadership, and organizational management. He is also a certified instructor with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. He is a court-recognized subject matter expert in numerous technical and legal capacities, having testified in the 20th, 16th, 11th, judicial circuits and 6 different court districts, in addition to being featured in media interviews. His expertise stems from over 500 documented criminal investigations. Dr. Frank Schmalleger is a distinguished professor at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. He holds degrees from the University of Notre Dame and the Ohio State University, having earned both a master's and a doctorate in sociology from the Ohio State University, with a special emphasis in criminology. For 20 years, he taught criminology and criminal justice courses at the University of North Carolina, Pembroke, and for the last 16, he chaired the university's Department of Sociology, Social Work, and Criminal Justice. The university named him Distinguished Professor in 1991. Frank Schmalleger is the author of numerous articles and more than 40 books, his most recent being the 17th edition of Criminal Justice Today. Frank, Kyle, welcome. We are so happy to have both of you with us here today. And Frank, with that, I will turn the conversation over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. And hello, Professor Plussa, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
I'd also like to say a special hello to your students, who I understand are watching today. I know you're often the one sitting in my seat. You interview people for your classes and to create online videos. But today the roles are reversed. So let's see how that goes and get right to our questions.
Sounds great.
First off, I know that you wear a number of hats. Can you describe some of those for me?
Well, Frank, I don't actually wear many hats. If I'm working outside in the sun, perhaps, but I want to keep what little hairs left on my head. I hold 2 professional positions. First and foremost, I am a sworn deputy sheriff in the great state of Florida. I am in law enforcement operations, but with a specialty bureau assignment that deals with law enforcement and youth relations. More on that later in other questions, I'm sure. But right after that, but resting up against it, I'm a adjunct faculty professor with justice studies at the Florida Gulf Coast University here in beautiful Southwest Florida. Harnessing the power of technology, my office is off campus, up in the clouds, wherever my travels take me. My lecture series courses are just like my bachelor's, master's, postgrad studies all were fully online and asynchronous through Canvas, meaning all 165 students have from Monday to Sunday complete the work as working adults. My 2 secondary hats beyond that, I serve nationwide as a motivational keynote speaker and a consultant and CEO of KP Consulting Group, LLC, based in Southwest Florida. And then as the voice of Gators basketball, WEVG Everglades City. Those are my hats, Frank.
That's great. And you have an announcer's voice with the that background.
It's hard to believe I get paid for this. I get paid for those games I work as a professional announcer, apparently, because I have so much fun. It's unbelievable.
That's wonderful. But I'm particularly interested in your work in law enforcement. So what is your story? How did you get started? What was the path that led you into law enforcement?
Okay, well, this is a long one, so hold on tight, folks. Back in 2011, this was a seller's market versus the buyer's market that it is today. Then I was flooded with applicants that were qualified. I managed to find the only sponsorship opportunity around as an officer in a metro urban big downtown jail in corrections. I got one of maybe 20 seats and well over 1,000 applicants for those 20 seats. Today, the buyer's market today, you can pretty much write your own ticket wherever you want to go. I worked in that jail in every way, never getting enough knowledge, especially the importance of interpersonal communication. When you are alone or running an open bay of 180 accused felons, and all you have is 2 handcuffs, 2 hands to use them, and 2 lips to speak with, you learn to master the art of communication. That's not what you say, but how you say it. If you always give respect, then you'll usually get it. When you're able to get someone else to do what you want them to do, but because they want to do it, communication, Frank, is the most valuable tool one can master. And corrections taught me to capitalize on communication. I can teach it, but that blade is sharpened through practice, application, and experience. But I still, working in the jail, I still heard the call to do more than that, to help others. I again worked in marketing myself and improving my qualifications amongst all those fields of applicants, got a commission as a state law enforcement officer and a deputized federal agent, first stationed in the Florida Keys and in Marathon. I was a civilian law enforcement liaison alongside United States Coast Guard Tacklet South, or the tactical law enforcement team, spanning the entire Florida Keys. We assist with the National Park Service, United States Department of Interior, Department of Commerce, you name it. However I could learn, however I could serve, however I could help. Leadership and law enforcement go hand in hand with learning. The day people stop asking you their questions is the day you stop learning or leading. Leaders learn every day. When people feel you no longer can help them find the answers they seek, they've concluded that you do not care. Either way is a failure of learning and a failure of leadership, and a turning point in one's career that it's time to turn your badge in. Because we are all always learning, especially in law and law enforcement. I learn from my students every day at the university. That was one of the highlights of my career. Working in the Keys was like an action movie, an episode of Miami Vice or something on a weekly basis. It cost about as much as filming an episode of Miami Vice as well on TV. The vessel pursuit of 2 jet skis, trying to outrun your Go Fast patrol boat around sunset, or the several other pursuits I got in with fleeing felons, still rank up there some of the most exciting career moments of my life. But I learned quick, if you love the work you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I met my wife when I was stationed down there in Marathon, and priorities changed. I still heard the call for public service, but my outlook was maturing in life. So I took a transfer to Southwest Florida, where I worked still as a state law enforcement officer for another 5 years or so, promoting to specialist and traveling back down to the Keys and all over Florida for different temporary duty details and different operations. As much fun as it was working for the state and traveling, I had to ask myself, do you live to work or do you work to live? The rotational schedule the state had and the travels took me away from my life. Even if you promote, you're still rotating on those days and nights and those days off. And you only have one life to live and one life to love. The time I got to spend with my wife and with the home we've made on our land out in the Western Everglades, that's my greatest treasure. So after some long thought and prayerful consideration, I made a difficult decision to resign my commission with the state, and I accepted appointment as a deputy sheriff directly into a specialty bureau that focuses on relations between law enforcement and youth within the community. In this business of law enforcement, our community is our capital. Mentoring our youth is the greatest investment we can make in our future. In the criminal justice field, whether you're appointed to a police officer position in a municipality or a deputy sheriff, you hold a certification as a law enforcement officer. That involves a lot of things, but I'll tell you one thing that it's not, Frank, is law enforcement is not a job. It's not a 9-to-5 job you take off when you change out of uniform. The badge that comes off your belt, there's still one always in your wallet, in your pocket. This certainly, law enforcement can be a career, but law enforcement is a way of life for those who hear and have that calling. To those listening, I challenge you, if you hear it, to join us. Answer the call if it's one you hear. Now, certainly doctors, nurses, teachers, lawyers, and more, they all do help others. They help people get through chapters in life that some are very difficult to overcome challenges. But I believe there's no greater field of work, no higher service, no greater opportunity to help others, to have a direct impact, to influence positive change in the lives of others in your community than our future, than every single day we have in this profession, than to answer this call to serve in law enforcement, the pillar of the justice profession.
Well, thank you. What you said is very, very inspirational, and I appreciate the answer. Now, my next question you may already have addressed in what you just said, but I'll ask it and see if you have more to add.
All right.
And that is, when you went from being a student to being a professional, how did you take the first steps into the field? And what drew you into the field?
It's a great question, but what drew me into this field, especially the academic side, is knowledge and then the law. Throughout different chapters in my story, I never stopped seeking knowledge. I never stopped trying to learn more. I got my bachelor's degree in organizational management while I worked nights as an officer in the jail. I got my master's in criminal justice administration, concentrating in criminal law and policy development while I was working as a state officer in the Keys. I got a post-grad certificate working as a state officer in Southwest Florida, where I began teaching in the Florida college system, and with FDLE as a defensive tactics instructor and use of force law instructor for officer response to resistance. So I continued my quest for knowledge, going as far as Texas to be nationally certified as an instructor in the seated battery of standardized field sobriety exercises for impaired operator interdiction. It's one of my several endorsements as a court-recognized subject matter expert, or SME advisor, as I call it, because I don't call myself an expert, but I guess the court does. It's 3 judicial circuits, as Rochelle mentioned, and 5 districts. I left no stone unturned. I still don't. Not long after my deputy sheriff appointment, I was offered, and my sheriff approved, of the co-appointment as a adjunct faculty professor with Florida Gulf Coast University, who I'm here for today. How did I get this lucrative offer, you may ask, Frank? Because I had the professional audacity to ask them. One day I was perhaps emboldened by being turned down by one of the local colleges. I called the closest university and asked to speak to the program coordinator and asked if he'd like me to work for him. There was no advertised position. I think he thought it was a prank. But I had the courage to put myself out there. I sent him my CV and I thought it was a done deal. But several months later, I got an email that my appointment to Injustice Studies, because I made myself so marketable, that they couldn't say no. And this is where I'm teaching today. I hope to be teaching for the next several decades, where after I finally retire and turn my badge in, maybe take this up full time, or maybe just play the part-time adjunct game. God only knows what's in store, not me. But you see, the Florida retirement system, where I work with the sheriff's office, I began working towards that pension very young. Before I was even 21. The Florida Sheriff's Association and state agencies share in FRS, the Florida retirement system. So you never lose what you put in. If I work for city of Orlando's police department, I have to do all 25 or 30 years there. I get credit time served every time I switch agencies in the Florida retirement system. So I get to retire from this career when I'm still in my 40s. Teaching at the university level is what I wanted to do and connect the dots maybe after that. But the fact that it's already started is another one of my many prayers answered. And if you want to ask your question of what drew me into higher education, would be service. Still, I live by the old adage, just as how I serve in law enforcement. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. In that same way, I teach and mentor others how to be the best public servants and practitioners of criminal justice that they can be, rather than just trying to be one myself. It's a much greater footprint and a positive impact that I can bring to my community and to the justice profession.
Well, that is indeed an inspirational answer. Thank you. And by the way, to clarify, you mentioned SME, which is subject matter expert, in case someone listening doesn't know, but you are an SME in many areas within the field.
I believe I'm 4. I know voting and waterways law, impaired operator interdiction, imperiled species conservation, at least 3. I think there's a 4th in there somewhere. It might have split off because one of the court circuits kind of divides it out. But I like to call myself a SMA advisor or SME advisor, or SMA, because I don't like to say expert because there's people that know more than me. But the court likes to use SME, and I call myself SME advisor because I like to stay humble as I can.
What do you think about the robots? I know we do see some security robots advertised, and companies now building them. You think we'll be seeing any of them brought into the field?
I'm not sure because there's a certain, as the aviators and pilots of today know, that they're, and like when I'm operating a vessel offshore, there's a certain amount of human factor that goes into the decision making, and you can't automate everything. There is a great element of technology in what we do. License plate readers. When something goes down, I blame it on AI. It's AI's fault. Blame it now until you can't. But I mean, the license plate readers and just the combing through the data, especially the threat assessments on social media, you can trigger certain algorithms to if someone posts certain words, certain lettering, in the school system especially, that can trigger certain alerts, and it's really, really effective in terms of proactiveness and getting in front of something before you have to play reactive and responsive law enforcement.
But bringing the focus back to your law enforcement career, what obstacles did you encounter in your career, and how did you overcome them?
Well, 2 specific chapters come to mind. Now, the first was after 4 years of being an officer in the jail. I still heard the call to do more, to help more, and serve more outside the walls. When I applied for the State Law Enforcement Officer Commission, that was a 14-month hiring window amongst the thousands and thousands of applicants, meaning they wouldn't advance the next step. I wouldn't hear back from the process for over a year. I mean, I applied in the very beginning, as soon as it opened up, in 14 months, and it's a long time. Well, I spent 10 of those 12 months choosing to drive almost 3 hours, 2 to 3 times a week, to the nearest crossover academy that was scheduled around my shift work at the jail. Literally sleeping on couches, floors, whatever it took, twice a week or so for those 10 months, all to reclassify my application packet that I'd already turned in from a corrections officer applicant to a law enforcement officer certified applicant. And that's why that's what I mean when I say make myself more marketable. That's what I encourage my students to do. I made it so they couldn't say no. I got the call to report to Tallahassee for my 3rd academy in 5 years. One reason I've always excelled in any professional interview that I've taken in this line of work is because I'm so impressed with the law enforcement profession. The greatest pleasant surprise for me in this field is about how much of a family we are, a brotherhood, a sisterhood, the thin blue line that separates good from evil, the sheepdogs who protect the sheep from the wolves. We are a family, not just here in Florida, but the entire United States and even the world. Whenever I walk into an interview room and sit before an oral board, of different ranks and different uniforms. I look at them as though I'm just meeting and speaking with members of my extended family that I've not met yet. That way, there's nothing to be nervous about. Just be yourself. They're humans, so be human. Highlight what you've learned and what you want to learn. Show them you have a teachable attitude. Grow through what you go through. And the second thing that comes to mind in terms of challenges, notable obstacles in my journey, was arguably the most major chapter in my life and career. It happened on August 3rd, 2018. That page turned when I left our new home, the one we just closed on, and I proposed to my now wife on the front steps. We'd moved all of our belongings into the garage real quick to get out of the rain. I had to go and return that U-Haul. She went on ahead of me and met me there. On that trip, I was one of 5 cars involved in the most major multi-vehicle collision in county history when I was hit head-on by an impaired driver. I thank God that I wasn't on duty or in my patrol vehicle, because I wouldn't be here. That U-Haul absorbed the weight of the truck that launched into the air and crashed down on top of me and imploded that cab around me like a cocoon. We snap our fingers about 7 milliseconds. That's about 20 times faster than we blink our eyes. It's about 10 milliseconds is how quickly it all happened with gravity. I didn't have time to steer. I didn't have time to brake, not even start to take my foot up off the gas. I want people to think about that, who's listening. Think about the next time you're to answer a text message, read a social media post, change a song on your phone. I wasn't doing any of that, anything other than drive, and I still couldn't stop it. There's nothing, not a single thing you can ever tell me that's ever worth distracting you from driving with 100% of your attention. That impact left me in a prolonged coma for several weeks with a severe traumatic brain injury, 3 brain hemorrhages, multiple facial fractures, including this giant break you can still see in my forehead, by my eye, nerve damage to the brain stem where it connects to the spinal cord. Doctors gave me a very low chance of just surviving in my coma past those first 3 days, maybe never to wake up. Still covered in all those scars. Scars are the mark of a living warrior. Whatever tried to knock you down wasn't strong enough to stop you. It only could leave that battle mark as a reminder of how strong you are. By the grace of God, I slowly emerged from that coma after 4 months of what would be 3 hospitals in 2 states. I was finally released and cleared to return to work with my agency in the state as an administrative capacity while I continued vision therapy. I'll never quit. Before I could speak, or I could even move my own eyeballs to look left, right, down, up, even blink. That's how I first communicated that I was still in there. My wife held my hand. I'll never quit. I squeezed her hand 3 times. I want my viewers listening here to look at the left side of their screen. And now your eyes only look at the right side of your screen. Now left and now right. For 6 months, I couldn't do that. When I would look from one target to the next, one eye would keep going. It didn't stop. Neuro-optometric vision therapy, or developmental vision therapy, is proven to work with children who are born with a lazy eye or cross-eyed perhaps. It's not proven for adults with TBI. In fact, they told me it was a 0% guarantee it would make any improvement in my visual deficits at all. There was a 100% guarantee of failure if we didn't try. My speech on neuroplasticity, the power of choice, is on YouTube as Kyle Plussa Keynote if they want to know more about that. But I don't call it an accident, Frank. And I ask others not to do the same. I don't refrain from calling these crashes as accidents, the ones caused by an impaired driver. Out of respect for the victims lost in these collisions, they are victims, and by God's grace and my grit, I'm not a DUI crash victim. I'm a DUI crash victor. Call them an incident, call it a crash, a collision, whatever you want, but impaired driving is not an accident. According to NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, 39 minutes. Every 39 minutes, another person dies. That's not a statistic. That's a human life. That's someone's mother, father, son or daughter, a brother, sister, a friend or neighbor. Could be yours, those listening. Love your loved ones. Every 39 minutes, another human life is taken away by an impaired driver out there. Now another number, 79 seconds. That's less than 2 minutes. Less than a minute and a half even. 79 seconds is when another DUI crash will leave someone either killed or left with a serious bodily injury, a lifelong disability, and some sort of permanent change from the carnage, like I was. That means in the time of one of these episodes, Profiles in the Justice Profession, and most of the episodes of my series, Justice Community Conversations, we've lost at least one, if not two, American lives from this. And at least 30 people or more are left with serious injuries for the rest of their lives. Impaired driving and the carnage it causes is not an accident. So stop calling them accidents. We as an industry must be leaders for our society to spearhead the change in American culture. These are criminal acts, folks. When someone gets behind the wheel impaired, they become assassins who are going to take out and try to kill you or the person to your left or right, whether they are aware of it intentionally or negligently by their impairment. It's 100% preventable. According to the data, 2 in 3 people will be impacted by impaired driving in their lifetime. That's 2/3 of those listening from intentional, deliberate, and preventable acts like this. So lots changed and a lot needs to change.
Well, Kyle, thank God you survived, and that is an amazing story. And you seem to be fully recovered and back.
One thing on that, I'm recovering, Frank. If you say recovered, it's past tense as I'm done. Recovering because you never stop, you never quit. I always get better, always get stronger.
It's a process.
Yeah, amen.
I was going to ask you about a day that stands out in your memory as a highlight in your career, but I think you've already answered that.
Well, there's one I could answer about that if you want it. It's shorter, I promise. It's there's been so many, but in terms of what actually jumps out as a specific day that is, it's not the day I got my first badge at the jail. That the badge is not a toy from my childhood. It's not even being commissioned by the state of Florida as a law enforcement officer with federal jurisdiction, and not even the day I was cleared for law enforcement service back to the job I had. The day of my crash was August 3rd, 2018. The first day back in uniform was February 3rd, 2020. Exactly 18 months, a year and a half to the day, Frank. They said it's a coincidence. I don't believe in those. Everything happens for a reason. That's a God wink. Amen. But the one day that has to be the highlight I have to name wasn't making me back then even. It would be where I got through the hiring process, the full thing as appointment to be deputy sheriff, without any accommodations or considerations for what I've been through, what I went through, what I fight through every day. I went through the full process like everybody else, because I'm not just living and surviving. I'm alive and thriving, Frank. I'm living my best life now. Every day I'm still here.
That's great to hear. It's truly an inspiration to hear what you have to say. Can I ask you, what's a day in your life look like today, a typical day? What do you do?
Okay, well, my day as a deputy sheriff never ends, per se. My cruiser's parked in front of my house, and we've literally had people banging on the doors at night. I have to come walking out in my, underpants or my shorts with no shirt, with a gun on my hip and a badge on my neck, because someone's experienced a mental health crisis, and I've got to keep them under control and kind of prevent a total meltdown. Well, I call it in and have an on-duty deputy come to do the Baker Act, because they know, though they were experiencing a crisis, they saw the sheriff cruiser out front. They know that means help is here, help is near, and we took an oath. We help everyone always. My shift, though, on a daily basis, though I am an operations division, I'm in a separate bureau than patrol operations. The folks who respond to calls for service over a certain district or a zone. I'm in Youth Relations Bureau. So I work within the public school system. I don't have the patrol shift of a 12-hour, 2-on, 2-off schedule with rotating weekends every other week. I start my day around 4:30 or 5 o'clock, if not earlier. Each day rolling out, wheels up in the driveway by 6, the absolute latest. It's a large county. It takes a good amount of time to get my duty rig on and run the pre-flight checks for my cruiser, lights, siren, radar, radio, all 3 GPS locating devices for dispatch for my safety. Because I am a full service deputy sheriff, and in the overall operations division, I can and do respond to priority 1 calls for service, 911 calls, always any off-street assistance calls, crimes in progress right now, crashes with injuries or unknown injuries, even medical emergencies. I'm the closest one with an AED. Really anything that impacts public safety. But when there's no calls for service and no suspected impaired driver in front of me on the roads, I'm posted at a public school every day, pursuant to the provisions of the Florida statutes requiring a sworn armed law enforcement officer on every public school campus in the state of Florida whenever students are on campus. Now, other agencies call us school resource officers, and we are and have that advanced training and certification. But my agency, we do much more than that. We don't just guard the schools. We train with our SWAT teams, but those are 4-man units, 4-man operational teams. We operate and train as 1-man warrior units. If and when some sort of hostile event or active shooter event happens on a school campus, God forbid, we launch, and we, on a daily basis, though, we speak and we teach classes. I have one next week. I'm teaching about the branches of government and social studies and the court system. We do presentations on public safety and youth and substance and drug awareness. We coach, we mentor, we just build relationships beyond law enforcement, youth, and the community. For my school, I'd go a step further because I'm Kyle Plussa, the voice of Gators volleyball, WEVG Everglades City. And I get a tremendous enjoyment out of that, tremendous fun. But I get to my school post before the first teacher and leave after the last student. So I get there around 7 or earlier and leave around 3, making it back home about 4:15 most days. I'm generally off when kids are out of school. So no weekends, there's no real night shifts unless there's a sports game. I'm the voice of Gators Arena when there's a sporting event. But I'm off on those big holiday breaks, which is important to me for my family time. If there's a teacher workday with no student, I have the option to take leave hours, or I can just work the road and help support patrol. My professor hat never comes off, though. Summertime is a time for vacations and travels outside of the holidays. When I'm back, because I am full-time, my temporary duties in the summer vary. I'm one of the few members on our agency's recruiting team who travels to military bases and out of state for career days. I support our road patrol units as more manpower. My favorite from my background is I work on the Marine unit with patrol boats, and even beach patrol unit as a new specialty on ATVs. And then there's my calling, DUI enforcement, impaired operator addiction. It's always been so close to me because of impaired drivers who almost took my life. So it's personal. It's a personal passion that I turn into purpose. This is one of those 3 SME ratings you mentioned earlier. So it's a packed day. It always changes with calls that come in, but it's a great career.
Well, to switch gears a bit, we do have some student submitted questions. In fact, we have far more than I think we'll be able to get to today. Excellent. But one is a little more practical. It says, what advice would you give to those of us considering getting into the criminal justice field today?
Join us. Come on, we need you. Our society, not just law enforcement, our society needs you. Our future generations need you. Our freedom and security, criminal justice, these things we talk about, need you. Law enforcement is not a field for the feeble. It's for those who hear a calling and are bold enough to answer it. Sure, there is an academy, and next to the armed forces and the military, it's probably the most intense training program that I can think of. But you can do it. I've been an instructor for them for many years. You can do it. All right. As hard as the academy was, what I put myself, my body, my mind through, 3 of them in 5 years, corrections, crossover to law enforcement, and then the state law enforcement academy. It was hard. That's an understatement. Hard on my body, my mind. Took sacrifices, choices, considering the priorities and the consequences if I didn't try. I was all in. Almost don't count. You don't almost do it. You don't almost make it. You either do or you don't. I was motivated, sure, but disciplined for certain. Discipline wins over motivation every day of the week. Hard work works. Working really hard is what successful people do. To grow through what you go through. Every door that shuts, it narrows down which one you can open. You can ask God, the universe, whatever higher power you choose to pray to or not, to produce doors in your path. But it's on you who are empowered to actually open them and walk through them. You choose your pathway. You can't go down 2 roads at once. You can control your speed, your fuel ups, and when you stop for maintenance. One thing our criminal justice industry has made great strides in, amongst all of its training, no other industry in the world gets as much training on a quarterly basis, a monthly basis than this. But one thing we've done really well at making great strides in is mental health. Awareness and support for our members. But beyond that, in our society, there's such a negative stigma. If I told you, Frank, I'll join you for the talk after I work on mental health, the totally different reaction than if I said, after I work out. Because why is that? Because we all talk about our workout regimens, our physical fitness routines, our diet and exercise. We approach our physical health so heavily, down to checking how our body looks in the mirror. Look at our size of our pants. When's the last time you looked in yourself in the mirror and checked on your outlook? You looked at your mental health, your perspective. Mental health is health. We're starting in law enforcement to understand that. So why does our society not talk about what we feed our minds, our mental diet, our mental fitness routine, who we spend time with, what we see on the computer, our movies, TV we watch, our social media feeds, the music we listen to, everything we put in, it all determines what comes out when the stress reaction hits. Now, there's stress in every walk of life. It's a natural occurrence. It's how we're programmed to react biologically, physiologically. Fight or flight, freeze. How we respond is how we are prepared. Preparation overcomes fear. How do you prepare your mind? I'm talking to our listeners here. Quality in equals quality out. Garbage in, garbage out. Positive in, positive. Negative in, negative. It's all related. There's the higher intensity of a stress in a situation, like critical incident, like a pursuit, a weapons drawn situation, a response to resistance, use of force, giving a CPR to a child on a crash scene while the parents there on the knees begging and crying for you to save their child's life. There's nothing more you can do than what you're doing. Now that's stress. The more intense the stressor, the higher a reaction to it. And then the longer it takes for us to resolve that scene determines how rough and long our descent is back down to reality. That's called post-traumatic stress. PTS. I don't say PTSD because for me and for us in law enforcement, it's not a disorder for how we deal with it. Through CISM, Critical Incident Stress Management. These are the units in different agencies like myself who are trained law enforcement professionals who get certain mental health professional training to recognize and deal with officers responding to critical incident stress. Now, when a prospective employer says you're overqualified for this position, or when a former employer begs you to later come back because they called your bluff and chose somebody else to promote and you chose to make moves in your life to better your circumstances. That's professional power. I tell people, make yourself more marketable. Help you help yourself. Become as disciplined, educated, and experienced as you possibly can so they can't say no to you. Prepare for progress. Focus on forward. Don't let your past dictate who you are today. Let it shape you in who you become tomorrow. Grow through what you go through. Showcase your mind. Telegraph your teachable attitude. Mental health is health. Market your mind as your tool. That's what I tell your people, Frank.
Kyle, we only have about 2 minutes left for our hour, and there are many student questions. It seems you're proving to be a popular person today. But let me ask you one more question, and we have about 2 to 3 minutes for your answer. And the question is, how do you define criminal justice? And what is generally misunderstood about the profession?
All right. Well, most scholars agree that it's a system. Criminal justice system is what we use, the terminology. But how one defines the criminal justice system and what that means requires critical thinking. So what is criminal justice? Some would say it's a product, an assembly line, if you will. Others would say it's a process, an obstacle course, if you will. One looks at crime control approach, focusing on the victim's rights and reduction of criminal offenses. The other takes a due process approach, focusing on defendant rights and reduction of criminal offenders. It's not one's better, correct, or more important. They're both very important, and they're merely just lenses we're looking through, perspectives on jurisprudence and the theory of law itself. It's not the left one's blue, the right one's red. Justice sees through purple. We're relying on this dance, this delicate dance between freedom and security.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed being here with you today. You've had some very interesting and amazing things to say, and inspirational as well, I might add. Let me ask if Rachel might come back and join us and see if she has any concluding words.
Well, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Frank. I have really enjoyed listening to the conversation. I learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners did as well. So I want to thank you both for being here, for sharing your story and your insights. And thank you to everyone who joined our call today. I will be following up after the call with the recording so that if you'd like to refer back to it for the future, you can. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you, Frank. It's good seeing you.